On the 5th anniversary of the start of the war in Iraq, the United States has lost 3,992 troops. But it turns out a lot of Americans don't know that. A new Pew poll shows only 28% of those surveyed know that almost 4,000 U.S. service members have died in Iraq. Almost half think the death toll is 3,000 or less, and 23% think it's higher. Last August, more than half of the people surveyed knew how many Americans had died in Iraq. The poll found public awareness of what's going on in Iraq has dropped as the news media have paid less attention to the war. For example, during the last week in January this year, 36% of people surveyed said the story they were following most closely was the political campaign. 14% said it was the stock market. 12% said it was the death of actor Heath Ledger. And only 6% said the story they were following most closely was the war in Iraq. And that's sad, because if people aren't paying attention to what's going on in Iraq, then maybe they're not quite so outraged about the almost 4,000 young Americans we've lost, or the almost 30,000 U.S. troops who've been badly wounded, or the more than 80,000 Iraqis who have died, or the more than $500 billion the U.S. has spent on this war, money that would have paid for this economic stimulus package, and there would have been $300 billion left over. Here's the question. How dangerous is it if Americans are becoming less aware of U.S. losses in Iraq? Paula writes from Virginia, on this 5th anniversary of the Iraq War, I'm in shock of the blood and treasure squandered away, and I'm in awe of the utter stupidity and callousness shown by the president and the 30% of the people who support him. My only question at this point is, why is this man still our leader? Robin writes, it's an interesting question, but I think a more appropriate one would be, why aren't the news media uncovering and reporting the real news about Iraq? We're hearing exactly what the administration wants us to hear, and what's there to worry about if everything is working? Mark writes, the lack of awareness, not the fault of the media. The information's out there for anyone to find. It's the responsibility of people to keep themselves informed of current events. If people can find out what's happening with Miss Hilton and Mrs. Spears, then they should be able... Mrs. Spears? It's Miss Spears, I think. Then they ought to be able to find recent information about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The sad truth is people are used to the turmoil overseas. They would rather spend their time being entertained than informed. I think Mark's got something. Becca writes, I'm extremely disappointed. I'm a college student. Friends who both support and even oppose the war did not think the number of casualties was as high as it is. How can we make smart decisions about who to oppose and what to support if we don't know the facts? Melissa in Louisiana, very dangerous indeed if Americans forget about the war. Just look at how they've forgotten about Afghanistan. This is exactly what the Bush administration wanted. Minimum coverage, no pictures of the flag-draped coffins, all served one purpose. If the American people disassociate themselves from this war, the Bush administration can prolong it for as long as they want. And Sal writes, ignorance is always dangerous, and in this case it's lethal. Lethal to our troops, lethal to our economy.